And warmest of aloha, folks. Welcome to this latest edition of 5 Questions. It's a conversation with community leaders that appears right here on KHVH Radio, KHVHradio.com, and, of course, with our good friends at Hawaii Reporter at hawaiireporter.com. He's a gentleman who has served in many capacities in our town and throughout the state, not only as a state senator for 10 years, but also as a candidate for governor and also serving in the Labor and Industrial Relations Appeals Board as the chair there. And he's a good golfer, and he loves the Beatles. How can you argue with a man by the name of Randy Iwase? Randy, good morning.
Good morning, Rick. How are you?
Doing very well. Thanks for joining us for 5 Questions. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm not a good golfer, however.
Oh, I don't know. I think you get around pretty well.
I can walk, yeah.
There we go. Listen, we're going to start right off with 5 questions, and number 1, obviously. Randy, you have served as a state senator for 10 years. Now, can you tell us kind of really what goes on behind closed doors that would really astonish our listeners or be of a real surprise? Because we don't really have a chance to peer behind the doors of the big square building.
You're talking about during my time there?
During your time, sure.
Well, I don't know if I can give you anything that would astound your readers, listeners. Excuse me. What happens behind closed doors is you have at that time I was in the Senate, 23 independent-minded senators, which is the how things are nowadays with politicians, each one their own planet. Coming into, say, a caucus and having an agenda and ideas and wanting to push it and arguing vociferously, sometimes passionately to get it passed, and others in the caucus not agreeing, But it is important that the caucus come to some consensus because, as a party with the majority in a particular body or in the legislature, it is your responsibility to have an agenda, to push that agenda, and to pass that agenda.
What is the fundamental difference between service, or at least between the two chambers of the Senate and the House?
Well, I've never served in the House,
right.
But I think one obvious pressure on them is that each of them have to run every 2 years. The system in the state is structured similar to the system on the federal level, that the House is supposed to be the people's body. It is supposed to be the one closest to the electorate. That's why the districts are smaller. That's why the election cycle is shorter. And so they have, and the Senate, state and federal level, is supposed to, with a 4-year cycle for the state, 6 years for the feds, they're supposed to have be able to have a much longer range view because the election is not always on top of you. And, for the most part, that's true. But that's the difference I see between, the pressures I see that are different between a sitting state representative and a sitting state senator.
And final point on this one, Randy, and that is, can you explain to us conference committees? Because it appears that conference committees is really a place where many, many major decisions are made. Well,
yeah. I mean, you come in there. I can speak for myself.
Sure.
First, in the caucus, you have a. Well, let me drop back. Before that, the Senate has to pass a bill. The House has to pass a bill. That becomes the House position. That becomes the Senate position. In caucus, you confirm with your colleagues that this is still the Senate position, and you carry that Senate position to the caucus with your counterpart on the other side. And the time I was there, I can't speak for how things are now, but back then, we're talking the 90s. The caucus, your colleagues from the caucus have a degree of trust in you, and give you the authority and the trust to reach compromises with your counterpart from the House. But it is incumbent upon each conference chair to have a pretty good understanding of the sense of the caucus as to how far you can compromise and reach an agreement, because you have to then come back and sell it to the caucus again. But yes, a lot of major decisions happen in caucus, and it is because you have two houses and because they have two different positions.
We're talking with Randy Iwase today, this edition of 5 Questions, and we thank Randy very much for his time. Basically, question number 2 along the same lines.
That's question number 1?
That's question number 1.
My God, Rick, you are Elvis.
We've got, well, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Because we give more than what people pay for. You know, we're
Rick.
We're great value here on 5Q.
Okay, Rick. Yeah, I guess with me, you got to give a lot because I have very little value to bring to the table.
Oh, my
okay, we can keep
gracious.
going on. Thank you.
Question number 2 really is, it seems, Randy, that we are still addressing and debating the same issues for decades. I mean, we have it in front of us today, again, whether it's education and budgets and things of that nature. Resolution to some of the grand issues of the day. Is this a chronic condition for us, Randy? Are there solutions for what ails us? At what point do we resolve some of the things that are, have been troubling us for so long?
Well, Rick, you're exactly right. I mean, these issues constantly appear. Housing, traffic. The traffic issue when I was on the city council is still an issue as the Central Oahu grows. Education. I was reading Dan Boylan's book a while back on John Burns, and he was talking about John Burns interacting with his colleagues, talking about the brain drain in Hawaii, keeping our young people here. This is back in the 60s. Yeah. And I don't think it's so much a failure of, at times it might be, but I don't think it's so much a failure to solve a problem as it is that the problems continue for eons. I mean, we're never going to solve, if that's the right word, the education issue. And I don't think we should ever be satisfied with the education system as it is. People must, and the educators should continue to seek improvements to the education system. And so the solutions, if you want to call them that, are really for the times that you live in to address the issues that you live in. The same with traffic. If we're going to continue to grow, then you have to have solutions for the time. Trying to have a long-term solution. Take the traffic situation. When I was in office, the city council and the Senate, as Central Oahu grew, we talked about Second City. I pushed Second City in the Everplains, pushed the University of West Oahu, fought for Iola Park so we could preserve open space, but direct traffic to, the housing and jobs to Central Oahu as a traffic measure. We opened the shoulder lanes on the freeway. But now, as we continue to grow, we have to address the problems again, the new problems. So it's a continuum, Rick. There is no panacea. There is going to be no grand solution. And I would hope that on issues like housing, the economy, education, traffic, that people will continue to press for new ideas. Another point is I was council budget chair when we addressed the issue of H-Power, and I recommended the building of H-Power because it was waste-to-energy conversion. It was the technology of the times. It was a path I thought we should go down, and the council agreed. But, now it's 30 years later, and new solutions must be found. But we addressed the situation back then, and every generation of leaders have to address the issues as they confront them.
Understand. I think this might dovetail a little bit into question number 3, and that is we had the recent announcement of Mufi Henneman seeking the CD2 congressional seat.
Yes.
What is your opinion of what is seemingly the familiarity of the same politicians that seem to be running for a series of different offices? Your take, is it truly public service, or is it perhaps maybe a little self-serving to where there's this perpetuity of serving in government? Well,
I think for the most part, and let's deal with it generally
sure.
First, for all those who are in office. I'm sure there are exceptions, Rick, and those exceptions float to the surface. They come out in in some form or another. But I think, for the most part, those who are in office are there because they have a belief that they are going to serve the public, and they are serving the public. Sometimes I wonder why some of them want to stay there, because it is not a fun thing to be in public service today, particularly the intrusion of privacy on your family who are not elected to office.
Right, I agree.
And so to be able to continue to stay there is, I think, a credit to those who, and a testament to their belief that this is something they want to do. This is a public service they want to give back to the community. But like I said, I'm sure there are exceptions. There are those who just don't want to give up what they have. It can become, for lack of a better term, an aphrodisiac, and you're lulled to staying there, and you get enamored with the trappings of the office. But, like I said, at some point in time, if you are that kind of a elected official, it rises to the surface, because I think the public comes to see that you are there to serve yourself and not to serve the public. But the fact that you continue to run in and of itself, I don't think is evidence, nor should it be taken as evidence that someone is a self-serving, egotistical individual that just wants to stay in office because of the trappings.
Understand. Talking with Randy Iwase and enjoying our 5 questions today, and more of almost a speculative question, and that is, with a U.S. Senate race upon us, at some time, if Senator Inouye chooses to lose office, or we're no longer blessed with Dan Inouye serving, what happens to Hawaii? What would be the impact to Hawaii without Dan Inouye's service in the U.S. Senate?
Well, from a personal standpoint, I've grown up. I mean, I'm 63 years old now. I'm a very aging senior citizen, and he's been here all my life. I was here so from a historical standpoint, it's a big loss. He was our first United States congressman. He was the first congressman of Asian ancestry. So for Asians, I think it's a loss of an individual. Then he moved forward to the United States Senate, rose in stature, and with that, and then there's a lot of emphasis on seniority still, I think, in the United States Senate. And it's obvious that his stature there has benefited the state of Hawaii in terms of the capital improvement projects, in terms just nationally, having a leader of experience. And I know people knock those who are in office a long time. When I was a young pup running for office, I'd say these guys are in office a long time, elect a new fresh face, and we're going to bring new energy to the office, blah, blah, blah. And yes, you do. But I've come to realize, and maybe because I'm an old man now, that there is something to be said about experience and the wisdom that it brings when you go through battles serving in office. And Senator Inouye has that. I think he brings that kind of stature to the United States Senate. It's quite obvious he is very high up there now. And so from the Senate, it's going to be a loss of a stabilizing, wise, long-serving senator. For the state of Hawaii, it's a loss of someone who has been there since the beginning and has a well-grounded understanding of what this state is, what this state was, what this state can be. And finally, just the fact that he has been there bringing back the kind of capital improvement monies and grant monies to the state of Hawaii, that's a big loss for us locally, and I think that's going to be a loss for us nationally.
And that's part of the final question today, Randy, and that has to do about the financial security of our state. And there's no doubt about it that the influence that Senator Inouye has been able to deliver to our state, we've come to rely upon. But we also have our own internal issues regarding capital, and that is the impact of unfunded liabilities that seem to loom off to the side, such as the ERS and mandatory health care, et cetera. What do you believe the impact is to our state, financially speaking, with these types of obligations when we live in the times economically that we do?
Well, if we had to pay everything today, Rick, the unfunded liability, obviously it's devastating. It's devastating for the state economically. It is devastating for those who are supposed to be the recipients of the unfunded liability funds, whether it's the pension fund or the UTF fund. So if everything had to be paid today, it is disastrous. However, everything does not have to be paid today, and I don't have the answer to this, but there has to be a plan developed over the long haul to address the unfunded liability. And whether it is, and some of it is being done now, requesting that the recipients pay more. We're talking about the health fund program. Another is that the government has got to fund and pay in its share rather than rating these funds. And making those kinds of adjustments, I think there is time to address that unfunded liability, provided that one, there's a recognition that the issue can become extremely devastating or severe for the state of Hawaii. And I think at least Governor Abercrombie, in his speech the other day, has pointed that out. There is that recognition. Second, that there is a plan that's going to be in place that will address it, and I think some of it is happening now. You see some grousing and grumbling about 50-50 copay on the insurance premium. That's on the recipient side. Mm-hmm. But I think from the employer side, the obligation is you pay what your share, and you stop rating the funds.
Yeah, right. It just seems to be this 500-pound gorilla, the proverbial gorilla in the room, and I agree. I understand that perhaps it's not due as of right now, but as we forward thinking and looking ahead at the difficulties we've had with budgets and revenue, it just seems that once those obligations start flowing in, are we prepared to meet them? And I think that's kind of what's top of mind with us right now.
Yeah, well, it's similar to. The kind of funds that benefits that come from Medicare and Social Security, and it's really a matter of making those adjustments as you go along. We did not get to the unfunded liability point simply overnight. It happened over a long period of time with some decisions that were made not maliciously. Not to steal from these funds, not to refuse to pay because you're stubborn and intransigent, but there were necessities that caused these actions to take place in the past. And so these got to be addressed, and stop rating, don't take from the fund, pay into the funds from the employer side, and from the employee side, looking at what kind of adjustments to the benefits may have to be made, some of which are being done now with the 50-50 copay, so to speak, and what kind of benefits will flow, whether it's just going to be to the retiree or the pensioner or to the family, and these kinds of things have to be addressed and can be addressed, because the unfunded liability is not going to be called in today.
Yeah. Any chance that you're ever going to run for office again, Randy?
Oh no, Rick. I'm very happy. And it's been a half a decade, and politics is like being a football coach in college. You're known if you win, and you're known for that year, and then the next year, if you lose, everybody forgets who you are. So it's going to be a long haul to start over again. And I think also, Rick, it is a time that the next generation, and I've said this to a younger politician, it is your time. I mean, I'm 63. In 20 years, I'm not going to be here. Your future is ahead of you. You have the obligation to put the time in for community service, get your input, and create the foundation for the future that you want and a future that your children and will have.
Very true. Very well put. Listen, you're not old. Stop saying that. Every time I talk to you, you always say you're an old man. Stop it.
Well,
Not
the
true.
only reason I feel young is Paul McCartney and Ringo Starr are older than me, man.
That part is true. And anybody who keeps the name Ringo after 60, I mean, come on.
Oh yeah, but he's still married to Barbara Bach, man.
That part is true. That part is true. Listen, thank you so very much. I hope we can continue chatting as time goes on, Randy. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick, and my regards to your family and to your good wife.
All the best. Thanks so much, Randy. Take care.
Yeah, thank you, Rick.
Bye now.
Bye.